We can see you on the side.
You can. Oh, okay. I can't see myself. So, okay, I'm good then. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this session. I'm Janene Cullen. I'm a Virginia Master Gardener, an Audubon ambassador, a Virginia tree steward, and a climate reality leader. Those are my hobbies. And in my day job, I'm a satellite engineer supporting the government. Lately, though, my hobbies have been taking over my life, especially the last couple of weeks. So I just finished my second book. And the topic is related to this talk. So I've been staying up late for the last couple of weeks trying to finish this. So if you like what you hear today, I just posted a book this week. It's live on Amazon. I will give you that link at the very end. And if I remember, I'll put it in the chat so you can capture that also. So again, thank you for coming today. And thank you for motivating me to finish this book that I've been working on for over a year. All right, here is the outline. I'm going to try to show you a little video, given what's happening. I'm not sure it's going to work. We'll see. We'll try. If not, you'll have the link in there. Then I'll give you a little background on what is climate chaos, just so we have a standard baseline going forward for this talk. And then I'll share with you 3 steps that gardeners can take to try to mitigate climate change. So Earthrise, here's a picture of Earthrise. This is a very popular photograph. This was the first time that Earth was photographed from space by human beings. This was taken on Christmas Eve on 1968. Earthrise is one of the most reproduced space-related photograph of all time. It appeared on US stamps, posters, and on the cover of Time magazine in 1969. Life magazine stated that this was the most influential environmental photograph ever taken. And you can see why. It was the first time that we saw Earth, and people now call this the blue marble, by itself against the black background of deep space. So it kind of gave us an idea of how fragile our Earth really is and our planet really is. So again, I'm going to attempt to stop share and play you this video because it relates very well to my talk today. And if not, you have the link there. We'll try it once or twice, see if it worked. Let me see. Oh, get out of here first. Hold on. Up. Oh. Escape. Try this. All right. You see it?
We do.
Yes, perfect.
On Christmas Eve, 1968, astronaut Bill Anders snapped a photo of the Earth as Apollo 8 orbited the moon. Those 3 guys were surprised to see from their eyes our planet looked like an Earthrise, a blue orb hovering over the moon's gray horizon with deep oceans and silver skies. It was our world's first glance at itself, our first chance to see a shared reality, a declared stance, and a commonality, a glimpse into our planet's mirror. And as threats drew nearer, our own urgency became clearer as we realized that we hold nothing dearer than this floating body we all call home. We've known that we're caught in the throes of climactic changes some say will just go away, while some simply pray to survive another day. For it is the obscure, the oppressed, the poor who, when the disaster is declared done, still suffer more than anyone. Climate change is the single greatest challenge of our time. Of this, you're certainly aware. It's saddening, but I cannot spare you from knowing an inconvenient fact, because it's getting the facts straight that gets us to act and not to wait. So I tell you this not to scare you, but to prepare you, to dare you to dream a different reality where, despite disparities, we all care to protect this world, this riddled blue marvel, this little true marvel, to master the verve and the nerve to see how we can serve our planet. You don't need to be a politician to make it your mission to conserve, to protect, to preserve that one and only home that is ours. To use your unique power to give next generations the planet they deserve. We are demonstrating, creating, advocating. We heed this inconvenient truth because we need to be anything but lenient with the future of our youth. And while this is a training and sustaining the future of our planet, there is no rehearsal. The time is now, because the reversal of harm and protection of a future so universal should be anything but controversial. So, Earth, pale blue dots, we will fail you not, just as we chose to go to the moon. We know it's never too soon to choose hope. We choose to do more than cope with climate change. We choose to end it. We refuse to lose. We do this and more, not because it's very easy or nice, but because it is necessary. Because with every dawn, we carry the weight of the fates of this celestial body orbiting a star. And as heavy as that weight sounded, it doesn't hold us down, but it keeps us grounded, steady, ready, because an environmental movement of this size is simply another form of an earthrise. To see it, close your eyes, visualize that all of us in this room and outside of these walls or in these halls, all of us change makers, or in a spacecraft floating like a silver raft in space, and we see the face of a planet anew. We relish the view, we witness its round green and brilliant blue, which inspires us to ask deeply, wholly, what can we do? Open your eyes, know the future of this wise planet is right in sight, right in all of us. Trust this earth uprising, all of us bring light to exciting solutions never tried before, for it is our hope that implores us at our uncompromising core to keep rising up for an earth more than worth fighting for.
All right. Get rid of that. Come back to this. Share screen. I can get back in. Share. Is it back?
Yeah, you're back with your note. Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Okay, perfect. All right. Wasn't that a beautiful video? I mean, I could just watch that over and over again. Again, that was sponsored by the Climate Reality Project, which I am a member of. Okay, now we're moving on to just to give you a kind of a common baseline of what is climate change and what are greenhouse gases. So this obviously is our Earth, and the sun sends energy to the Earth in the form of light waves. See this blue kind of circle all around the Earth? Think of that as our outer atmosphere. I think of it as like a thin blanket protecting the Earth. It's only 60 miles from the surface of the Earth to the end of the atmosphere. But this protects us. It keeps our temperature relatively stable. It saves us from the extremes that happen to other planets in our solar system. So some of the energy, you see the red lines there, some of the sun's energy gets re-radiated from the Earth back out into outer space. And that's in form of infrared energy, which we cannot see, but it's in the form of heat. So again, our blanket, our atmosphere that protects us, lets just enough of that infrared energy, that heat, back out into the atmosphere. Some of this outgoing radiation, you see this little red line that came back to Earth, some of it does get blocked, which is perfect. That is the greenhouse effect of our planet. It keeps our temperature relatively stable. So a small amount of it stays within our atmosphere, but most of the heat gets re-radiated back out into space. So watch between this chart and the blue line on this chart and the next chart. So you see how it thickens. As we add greenhouse gases, primarily carbon dioxide, into our atmosphere, it thickens that outer atmosphere. So again, think of it as thickening the blanket. So much more of that heat that's trying to leave the earth is blocked, and it comes right back down to earth, raising the temperature of our entire planet. So it's the thickening of our atmosphere that is causing the heat to be trapped within our atmosphere. Okay, moving on. The charts here. So on the left, you can see a report from NASA documenting global temperatures that are about 1 degree Celsius, which is about 1.8 degree Fahrenheit, above average since 1880. In my charts, you'll see a couple of charts from NASA and NOAA. NASA generally takes data from some space. NOAA is focused on taking data from the Earth measurements. But since the climate change is impacting all of us, they're really working together. So you'll see a lot of charts both from NASA and NOAA in the presentation day, but it's just solid scientific data. So 2/3, if you're back on the chart on the left, 2/3 of this warming has occurred since 1975. And this may not seem like a big deal to us because temperatures fluctuate outside every day. But a 1 degree Celsius global increase in temperature over the entire planet, it is significant because it takes a vast amount of heat to warm all the oceans, the entire atmosphere, and all the land by that much. So to try to bring it internally, think of the Earth temperature similar to your own body temperature. A 1 degree Celsius increase is about a 1.8 degree Fahrenheit increase. So if your own body temperature went up 1.8 degrees, you're not going to feel that good. You still be all right, but you're not feeling that good. Possibly a little achy. With a 2 degrees Celsius, which is 3.6 degree Fahrenheit change difference, you probably feel bad, and you may be at the doctor's office. 3 degrees Celsius, which is 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit, you're feeling really bad and you're close to death. Above anything above 4 degrees Celsius, which is 7.2 degrees Fahrenheit, you're probably dead. So the Earth temperature, it really, think of it as the Earth as sensitive to these temperature changes, like your own body is. And right now, our Earth is in danger. So bringing in a little closer to home, the chart on the right. So this is just the United States, and these are temperature changes that has happened since the 1900s. And so some data from NOAA, and you can just see just in the United States over the centuries what has been happening, particularly out west. If you can see my cursor, it's just a solid red change from the early 1900s. So this is what greenhouse gases are, a little overview. This is from the Environmental Protection Agency. Carbon dioxide makes up 80% of our greenhouse gases. This enters our atmosphere primarily through burning of fossil fuels, oil, coal, and gas. So anytime you burn anything, just about, you're adding carbon dioxide and pollution into the air. Excessive levels of carbon dioxide can remain in the atmosphere for centuries. The next part is methane, about 10% of the greenhouse gases. Methane is emitted during the production of fossil fuels, oil, coal, and gas. It's also emitted from agricultural practices and by decay in landfill. Methane is particularly bad because it's 25% more potent than carbon dioxide, meaning it causes more heating in our atmosphere. I've seen a lot of commercials recently, funded, I'm sure, by the fossil fuel companies, about how great natural gas is, American natural gas. Natural gas is 80% methane. It may be natural, but it's from the ground. They're digging it up from the ground, and it should be staying in the ground where it belongs, not being burnt and released into our atmosphere. The third section I'll talk about is nitrous oxide. It's 7%. Nitrous oxide is emitted during agriculture activities, and of course the combustion of fossil fuels. Nitric oxide can be 300 times as potent as carbon dioxide, again, meaning it just heats up, allows the heating of our atmosphere even more. Excessive levels of nitric oxide can remain in the atmosphere for about 100 years. So here are charts again from NASA and NOAA showing the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. So as of 2020, if you look at the chart on the left, The concentration of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere has been the highest it has ever been in human history. This chart is all millennial. They can figure out how much carbon there was in the atmosphere by taking deep soil samples, by taking ice samples. This is from the beginning of time. So look at what's happened in the last, say, 100 years or so. So what happened in around 1900s? A lot of burning of fossil fuels. We had a lot of factories, fossil fuel processing plants, fossil fuel extraction techniques, coal mines, oil wells, just a significant increase in burning of fossil fuels. So on the right, just bringing it a little closer to home and a little bit in our timeline, this is from NOAA. This is from 1960. That was the year I was born. So just in my lifetime, look at the amount of carbon dioxide that we have just pumped into our atmosphere. So you may have heard November 2021, the United Nations held a climate change conference in Glasgow, United Kingdom. And they issued a report generated from thousands of scientists around the globe with the strongest words that I have ever seen them write to date, saying it is indisputable that human influence has warmed the climate system, raising global surface temperature. So there is now global scientific consensus that the Earth's climate is warming, and the burning of non-renewable fossil fuels is the primary cause for damage to our planet. So, all right, so now we get into the fun stuff. What can backyard gardeners do? So there are millions of backyard gardeners, and we can make a difference. So I picked 3 things that are most applicable for this conference about what backyard gardeners can do. The 3 things are, of course, take care of the soil, compost everything, and plant more plants. So I'll get into each of those a little more in detail. First, taking care of the soil. A solution to significantly help our quest to mitigate climate chaos is literally right under our feet, the soil. Our soil provides 95% of global food supplies, but it is a limited resource that is under increasing pressure from climate change, population growth, urban development, and pollution. So the 5 ingredients for a healthy soil is listed here: minerals, organic matter, living organisms, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, air, and water. Healthy plants, healthy soil supports healthy plants, and healthy plants play a major role in cleaning up the pollution in our atmosphere. Healthy soils can absorb 25% of the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. But the hidden magic of the soil, which I referenced to earlier, was the living organisms. According to the University of Oregon, a single teaspoon, it's just 1 gram of rich garden soil, can hold up to 1 billion bacteria, fungal filaments, several thousand protozoa, and scores of nematodes. 1 gram. So the plants absorb the carbon dioxide from the air. They use that for their own energy sources, and they store the carbon in their tissues, their roots, their stems. When the plant decays, these living organisms consume that carbon and then turn that into rich nutrients for other plants. Another aspect of taking care of your soil, don't damage your soil. And the number 1 way that we damage our soil is by tilling. So if you recognize these pictures, these are from the Library of Congress, the American Dust Bowl from 1934 to 1940. At least 50 million acres of the land in America's Great Plains, primarily Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Kansas, and Colorado, were affected by this. The Dust Bowl was largely caused by very ambitious farmers tilling the once fertile prairie soil over and over. So they would plant, harvest, till, plant, harvest, till over and over again. They would never put anything back into the soil. They'd never let the soil rest. In the mid-30s, this area experienced one of the longest droughts in America. So with all the repeated tilling and then the drought, the soil just gave up and it just literally blew away. It just turned to powder. All the states around all this area, you can see the dust storms on the right. All these dust bowls, they call them black blizzard storms. They just blew across all the states around there. It's really fascinating. I'd encourage you, if you have time, to just do a Google search and do a little bit more. When doing this talk, I found out a lot more about the Dust Bowl than before. It's pretty fascinating. So a little more modern times, how we till is the rototiller. I had one of these for years until I finally gave it away. So according to the University of Maryland, topsoil is in the top 4 to 8 inches of soil that contains most of the organic matter, plants, roots, and microbial life. As we already discussed, there are literally billions of microbes in a handful of healthy soil. The system is referred to as the soil web, you see in the chart on the top right. Healthy soil is flourishing with all those microorganisms that you see in the food web. If you till your garden, you are literally can be chopping them up or suddenly exposing them to oxygen and sunlight, which also kills them. And by tilling, you lose up to 50 to 70% of the carbon that is already stored in your soil. Another way to take care of the soil is keep the ground covered at all times. Mulch is any material applied to your soil surface for protection or improvement of the area covered. Mulching is really Mother Nature's idea. What happens every fall when our trees lose their leaf? They provide nature's perfect mulch when the leaves fall to the ground. Mulch can be leaves, needles, twigs, pieces of bark, spent flower blossoms, fallen fruit, any other organic material. Cover crops on the right, and I think this is a almond orchard in California. Cover crops are even better than mulch. It provides roots in the ground at all times. Cover crops are plants that are not usually meant to be harvested. They stabilize the soil, improve soil structure, help avoid erosion, add nutrients to the soil, and since there are plants, they pull carbon dioxide from the air. So planting winter cover crops such as grasses, cereal grains, or legumes will help stabilize, build soil, add nutrients to the garden soil. So mulch on the left is good, but cover crops on the right is even better for protecting your soil. And the last part of protecting the soil, if at all possible, no synthetic pesticides or fertilizers. Until the 1940s, farmers used manure to fertilize their fields. In the 1940s, they started relying on chemical fertilizers to add formulated nutrients to the soil and pesticides to kill anything that they thought of as a pest. Manufacturing this synthetic fertilizer must be done at very high pressure under high temperatures. So the energy to manufacture these fertilizers comes from burning non-renewable fossil fuels. In fact, 1 to 2% of the carbon dioxide released into our atmosphere comes from the manufacturing and the use of fertilizers. Once the fertilizer is spread on the ground, it must be incorporated in the soil quickly, or a large percent of the nitrogen can escape into the atmosphere in the form of ammonia gas. Once the fertilizer starts to break down the soil, it releases nitric oxide, which I discussed earlier, a very potent greenhouse gas. Nitric oxide emissions directly caused by human activity has leapt 30% over the past 4 decades, primarily because of fertilizer use. Also, ample use of synthetic fertilizer has led to environmental consequences such as agriculture runoff. When fertilizers are over-applied to fields, the excess, up to 50%, runs off the soil into local water sources. And this can create algae blooms in local water systems, killing aquatic wildlife and water plants. I don't know if you saw the news, it was about 2 months ago recently in Florida. Several hundred manatees died from starvation because fertilizer ran off into their water. The runoff killed all the underwater plants that they eat. For pesticides, pesticides is kind of a group of chemicals. There are insecticides, herbicides, rodenticides, and fungicides, just to mention a few. Each pesticide is meant to kill certain pests. They usually reach other plants or animals that were really not the original intended target. Another concern for these chemicals is depleted soil. Being sprayed several times a year with both fertilizers and pesticides, the soil many times gives up, and then you have non-fertile dirt. And the last thought on this page, just talk because this comes up a lot in Master Gardener conversations, it's regarding organic pesticides. Usually that is just a marketing phrase. Even if a chemical started out being plant-based, usually it is so concentrated, it'll kill most soft-bodied insects. So we're finding more and more that even pesticides called organic are damaging to our pollinators, especially the bees. So if at all possible, do not use any pesticides. As I mentioned before, the best way to grow an abundance of healthy crops without dumping chemicals on your property is just to ensure that you have healthy soil. Tip number 2, compost everything. As a master gardener, I frequently do lawn and yard assessments, and my number one recommendation is always add compost. Compost helps create healthy soil, and healthy soil is less disease prone and more tolerant of weather conditions like too much heat or too much water. Composting creates free organic materials made from food scraps and yard debris that you were just going to throw out anyway. So instead of throwing them out, let's just put them to work in your yard. Americans throw away up to 40% of the food they buy. That equates to about 1 pound of food per person each and every day. Chucking perfectly compostable food doesn't just waste money, it increases your carbon footprint. Organic waste slowly decomposing in oxygen-poor landfills generates methane, which I talked about at the beginning. So about 18% of all US methane emissions come from food and yard waste rotting in landfills. So composting this waste in your yard prevents these greenhouse gas emissions and also returns that nutrients directly to your soil. So save your money. You don't have to buy compost or fertilizer store. You can just make it right in your own backyard. So many gardeners, when they compost, they either just do in their backyard using a compost bin or possibly just a corner of your yard. The trick to making healthy compost is balancing these 4 things: carbon, nitrogen, water, and oxygen. These 4 things combined together create a marvelous organic amendment to your gardens that you can really just put anywhere, in gardens, in plant beds, and just even in the grass. You can even do worm composting, the chart on the right and the bottom, called vermiculture. These red wigglers are just dynamos at composting any kind of your kitchen waste. So here's the recipe for compost: 3 parts brown, brown being high carbon materials, and 1 part green, green being high nitrogen materials. And don't stress about this recipe. I know a lot of people that just do half and half. A lot of people don't care. They just keep throwing stuff in there, and that's fine. It will decompose. It just may take longer. This is a recipe for if you want the fastest compost that you can get. So try to meet this ratio. But again, it just really doesn't matter. Just put everything you have, what's ever available to you in your yard or your kitchen, and just put it in a compost bin. It will eventually decompose. The red line at the bottom, though, no animal products in your compost bin. So that means no bones, no skin, no dairy, no oil, no grease. If you put those into your compost bin, you're probably going to get visited by some critters that you probably didn't want in your backyard. So no animal products, but just about everything else. You see that list, and this is not a complete list. You can put a lot of things in your compost bin. So last tip, plant more plants. This is everyone's favorite. So the most basic way to prevent greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide from entering the atmosphere and warming the climate is by growing plants. As gardening enthusiasts, this is just what we do. This is, again, a green light for gardeners to justify the excess of plants that you buy. We are just literally saving the planet. So being a plantaholic has multiple benefits for our environment. So not only do plants pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, but then they put back clean oxygen in the atmosphere for humans to use. So the more plants, the better for our environment. Even better than planting plants is planting native plants. And you kind of heard that with the keynote speaker we had this morning. Currently, about 80% of the plants in our neighborhoods are mostly foreign. Foreign plants are like plastic to most of our pollinators. Pollinators need the native plants that they have co-evolved with over thousands of years. And here's a quote from Professor Doug Tallamy. And again, you heard a reference to him in the keynote today. A lot of gardeners follow Professor Tallamy. So this is his quote: "In the past, we have asked one thing of our gardens, that they be pretty. Now we need them to support life, sequester carbon, feed pollinators, and manage water." So according to the National Academy of Sciences, the Earth is losing about 1 to 2% of its insects every year, a trend some are calling the insect apocalypse. So if you have no insects, you have no birds, you have a lot less food and very few flowers. We need the insects and pollinators, and they are really struggling right now. So do what you can to get native plants in your property and your community. The good goal, and again, you heard this earlier this morning, is to have a goal of 70% native plants on your property. And those native to your region. So that's a good number that will provide food, habitat, and habitat for your local pollinators. Continuing on, plant more plants. Another tip to help the environment is to grow your own food. This allows you to know if anything was sprayed on your food, and it makes you more food independent. Large corporate farms currently produce almost 50% of the food in America. Our food system is responsible for 1/3 of the overall carbon dioxide emissions. That's because of the chemicals used to corporate farms and the emissions released as they transport these foods to your grocery store. Fresh produce at your grocery store may not be so fresh. On average, food travels 1,500 miles on trains, trucks, or even ships to reach your plate. That one trip creates about 4.8 metric tons of carbon dioxide. If you grow it yourself, there's no transportation cost. You literally walk out in your backyard and pick it and eat it, and it will be the healthiest produce possible for you. See the picture on the left? That's again from the Library of Congress. That's a victory garden poster from World War II. Both in World War I and World War II, the government strongly encouraged all Americans to grow their own food. They wanted to ship most of the processed food overseas for the military, but there was a shortage of foods. So they even spent money encouraging all Americans to grow your own foods, and they called it a victory garden. So I think we should all do that again for the climate chaos. Let's plant our own victory gardens. One more slide for plants, and this is mostly talking about trees. You see on the left that Amazon forest continues to be under assault. Unfortunately, they are still eliminating about 1 football field of trees per minute. I just looked it up for this meeting. Between May and October of 2021, 1.2 million acres were burned in the Amazon. That's an area about 3.5 times as big as London or Delhi. That is just devastating to me. If you see the picture on the left, that's a NASA photograph from 2019. Hopefully it shows up on your screen. All the orange, brownish orange, however it shows up, those are all fires, intentionally set fires to clear land to burn the Amazon, the rainforest in the Amazon. And they clear land to increase their cattle farms or to grow monoculture, primarily palm oil, so they can sell it to the West. I know we can't do a lot about the Amazon, but if you can do one thing, and again, you heard this earlier, I'm glad that we're repeating the same message from the keynote speaker. If you can do one thing, plant a tree. Hopefully a native tree. And if you have the space, an oak tree. Oak trees are a keystone plant. They can support 537 species of caterpillars. And if you don't have space in your yard, join a reforestation effort. I know the Master Gardeners sponsor a few of those. The Soil and Water organizations sponsors a few of those. So if you can plant native trees, you can help the environment in your community, again, if you just don't have the space in your yard. So in summary, backyard gardeners and small farmers are the stewards and guardians of our planet's precious soil. Maintaining healthy soil, planting trees, growing your own food is not only an act of self-reliance, but it's actually addressing the solution of our evolving climate challenge. Reminder of the 3 tips to help combat climate chaos: take care of the soil, compost everything, and plant more plants. Every square inch of natural space on your property can sequester carbon in their plant roots, the plant leaves, and in the soil. The more plant material on your property, the more beneficial to your local environment. All of the trees, shrubs, vegetables, vines, ground covers, grasses on your property are part of the solution to pull carbon dioxide out of the air and improve the health of the soil. Plants are very economical, and they have a proven track record, billions of years of evolution of being able to stabilize and maintain our environment. So the last slide is just some references. I told you I would share you the link to my book. This just went live this week. If you like this presentation, I have a lot more ideas in this book. Unfortunately, this is just the Kindle version is available now. I was having some trouble formatting the book for the paperback, so I will work on that this weekend, and it should be live next week. Here's a link to the Master Gardeners of Prince William County. Again, I'm a Master Gardener. You can, if you have any questions about soil, trees, grasses, anything, especially native trees, you can contact the Master Gardeners. That's staffed by Master Gardeners. That's a helpline, and they will answer your questions. And I'm an Audubon ambassador, so some of the information I shared with you today came from the Audubon at Home program. This adorable picture on the left is one of their photos that I just love, so I wanted to share that. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing and see if we have any questions. And then thank you for coming today. Get out of here.
Well, thank you, Janene. If you have questions, please type them in the chat. It looks like the chat is for the whole group, so I'll have to pull them out, and please be very specific in your questions.
Okay. Can we unmute anyone if they have a question for me or not? That's not working.
Yeah, I'll read them off the chat.
Okay.
I think that'll do that.
I have a question.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
What's the best way to actually start your compost? You know, you can start by dropping in your waste, but do you need soil to start the compost process a little bit or something?
Yeah, a little bit of the best kind of soil you can get, you put it in there to act like a starter. You don't have to have it, but that will start the process. If you have some healthy soil, you can from your yard. So it has to have the live organic material that we talked about, all the little critters in the bug in the soil. So grab some healthy soil from your yard, throw that in, that'll be a starter. And really you can just put anything down. You can put it in the corner of your yard, put some sticks down so it gets some oxygen underneath of it. It's just so easy to start. And there are a lot of composting bins available. They're pretty inexpensive. So just get started. But yes, if you put some soil from your yard, some good healthy soil, it will act like a starter for you.
Good, thank you.
And Janene, when you're composting, is there a minimum size, length, or width and height for composting to work?
There are some preferred diameters because if you get it too big, you can't get the oxygen flow in there. So I would Google online. I would say 3 feet by 3 feet is probably the biggest that you'd want. Most of the bins are about 2 feet by 2 feet. So it has to be manageable because over time it's going to stop doing anything in the middle, and you need to either move it or get some air in there so it'll continue composting. So yeah, you can get too big, but just because it's got to be manageable for you. But for me, I just have several. I have 2 tumbling kind of bins out back. I have worm composting in my basement, and I have a corner of my yard where I just throw stuff. So you can do multiple bins around your house.
And how does one no-tiller garden coming from turf?
Coming from turf, so what I would do is smother. If you want to create a garden bed and you have turf there, so what I do is I put like 3 layers of newspaper, black and white newspaper. The ink is biodegradable. Black and white newspaper, cover the area that you want. Put compost on top of that, and in about 3 months, you'll be ready to plant in it. That way you don't have to tear it up. The microorganisms from the ground will work their way up through that newspaper. Newspaper degrades pretty quickly. It'll get to that compost. It'll create a very healthy living environment. You'll be ready to plant.
Okay, you mentioned one of the most important things we can do is to plant a tree, but you also need to mention that we need to stop supporting the palm oil industry and that we need to stop supporting the agribusiness that promotes the decimation of natural habitat to grow food for cows. This is more of a general question. It's a big question, but this is more of a general one.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that your personal choice, and my book talks more about personal choices and some things you may want to do. I was kind of focusing on today on gardening. So for gardening, the thing you can do is plant plants. In your personal life, absolutely stop look at the ingredients of things, stop buying so many things that have palm oil in them. Hard to do since about half of the products, the lotions we use, the cosmetics, the foods, crackers, it's in so many things. So palm oil, it's hard to get away from, but consumers can do it over time. If we keep telling companies we don't want things with palm oil in it, that could be a grassroots movement that we can do. Another big thing for the cattle ranches, why they're destroying the Amazon. I know it's a very personal choice, but you can cut back on the amount of meat, stop that demand. The cattle industry is one of the biggest contributors to the greenhouse gases. And not only that, but they're destroying the land because they clear the land. They're eating all the grain that we could give to people. They're feeding them to the cattle so they can get them fatter. And then of course the waste of these big feedlots, it's polluting our environment. So those are other things I didn't mention today, because again, I was kind of focusing on the plant people. But if you take a peek at the book, it has a lot of other ideas, more of a broader scope.
Okay, here's one for me here. Not from me, but how does one start a garden from pure red clay, which a lot of us have in our backyards?
Did you hear me say compost? Lots and lots of compost. So clay is actually not a bad soil. It has a lot of minerals. The problem is that they all stick together, right? So compost. Over time, that compost and work our way down into the soil, and it'll use some of those minerals in the clay soil. Again, clay soil is not bad. It's actually got a lot of good stuff in it, but it just sticks together too much. So you have to separate. You only want like a third of clay soil. You want other types of soil in there also. So compost. That's always my answer.
William Allen, you have your hand up. Trying to unmute you here. Do you have another question?
All right. You mentioned native plants. A lot of yards in particular have plants that are not necessarily native, but they do attract bees. Let's say, for instance, the African what is it? Marigold, the marigold plant. Those are good for keeping certain pests away. Are those good plants to plant since they're not necessarily native to an area? I live in Maryland, but they do have a benefit to your garden. So how do you balance between natives and non-natives if they offer some benefit to your garden in terms of pest control, integrated pest control, or attracting the kinds of bugs and bird life and what have you? How do you balance that out?
So the marigolds, the people like to use them because of the smell. I would posture that a better way for pest control in your garden is to attract beneficial insects, and they will take care of all the other insects. And you do that by having native plants, native flowers, native bushes all around your planting bed. So, and again, we don't have to be 100%. We're aiming for 70% native. If you just love marigolds, let that be your 30% that you like in your yard, and you like to use that around your planting beds. But if you can have more native plants, again, for around vegetable gardens, I would, flowers and small bushes. If they're native, they will attract the beneficial insects that will go after the ones that are eating your plants. So it's always a balance, but I think I would err on the side of native plants. Keep that 30% of things that you just love and want to have in your yard. So it's just always a balance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left and a lot of questions here. So I've got one from Dave Larson. My screen just went blank on me. Dave, I see your hand up, but regarding mulching, most landscapers don't mulch year after year, getting paid by the cubic yard. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so the master gardeners have a great handout that I maybe we can link it somehow. You need mulch donuts, not mulch volcanoes. So yeah, landscapers are horrible about piling mulch up against a tree. That's very damaging to the roots of the tree. You only need like 2 to 3 inches of mulch. It needs to be away from the trunk of the tree. Mulch is great for keeping the soil moist, and eventually real natural mulch, not dyed mulch, real natural hardwood mulch will decompose into the soil. So that's good, but it needs to be away from the tree, needs to be in the shape of a donut, not piled up against the branch of the tree, and only 2 to 3 inches thick.
Thank you. Dave, I've tried to unmute you. Do you have another question?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Great talk, Janene. Great talk.
Thank you.
I love everything you said. Going back to your climate change summary, which I thought was fantastic, I just wanted to add one of the major concerns about methane is the thawing of the permafrost. Now, I know you didn't mention it. I know you're aware of it.
It's in the book.
but I'm sure it is. But that's a problem we don't really have any control over, because that's directly tied to the global temperature.
Yep, I agree. And that leads to sea level rise. So all of our coastlines,
yep.
Virginia Beach and Miami, when that permafrost melts, of course, that releases carbon dioxide into the air. And that whole region, our northern region, as that whole area melts, the snow melt goes down into the oceans, raises sea levels around the world. So yeah, there's, again, in the book, I mentioned some other things not directly related to gardening, but one of the things is, we've got to help try to save our permafrost in the northern and southern regions.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thanks for the feedback.
Kitty, you had your hand up earlier. Did you have a question?
I see someone asked how I compost in my basement. That was the vermiculture, the worms, the green wigglers. And I made my own little compost bin. You can make it from a couple totes. There's some, you can just Google search how to do it. Make sure you have a little bit of airflow. You don't want to close them in. I keep it in my basement. They don't smell, they don't attract anything. And they're the little dynamos about composting all my kitchen scraps.
Okay. Catherine O'Malley, take down an oak in her front yard. She'd like to know if she'd like to turn that front yard into a native plant area. Does she grind the stump?
I would, what I would do if it was my yard. I mean, I don't know how high the stump is. If they got it pretty close to the ground, I would add compost on top of it, flowers on top for a while, and just let the decomposers get rid of it. Add as much compost as you can. Now, if it's too high, depending on how they hit it, how they cut it for you, you may need to grind the stump out. That is very disruptive to all the soil. Over time, it will recover, and it's good that you're going to keep it right there, not trying to dig it out and haul it out to the landfill. Again, it depends on what it looks like in your yard. What I would try to do is just to let it decay naturally, but then you do that by adding compost and getting those little microorganisms working for you to decompose all those roots. They love kind of dead plant roots. So they're going to be very happy if you can set up an environment for them wherever you had to cut that tree down.
Well, thank you. And then we have a question here, Janene, if you would be willing to put your email in the chat so that folks could contact you about speaking at their local clubs.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay. All right, we have a question on green mulch, and can you talk about green mulch?
Yeah, green mulch, I assume you mean plant cover. Cover crops, I kind of mentioned that a little bit in there. So some people call cover crops green mulch. Some people, when they grow the cover crops, they cut them back and they use that as green mulch. Perfect. I mean, that's the second thing after having live roots in the ground and a live cover crop would be green mulch, because you're just chopping that and you're just laying it back over. No need to try to work it into the ground. Let the little microbes in the soil take care of that for you. May look a little funny for a couple of weeks, but trust me, they're going to go to town on that. They're going to incorporate it, cycle it right back into the soil.
Okay, so we have a couple minutes left. If anybody has any additional questions for Janene, just either put your hand up or type them in the chat.
I see someone said the red wigglers are an invasive species, so don't throw them outside. True, they won't last outside anywhere. They need to be between like 50 and 80 degrees. They would never make it outside, but you're right, they are an invasive species. So mine have been living in my basement for years, and I've shared some with other master gardeners. So, but you are correct.
Okay, what's the best way to cut back a cover crop so you can plant? How soon can you plant?
So if you have a cover crop, you can leave it growing until it starts to go to seed, because you don't want it to grow to seed, because then it's going to use all the resources in the ground to produce their seed. So as soon as it starts to get close to seed, just cut it down. When you plant, you can either turn it over or move it to the sides, or some people I've seen to just cut lines right next to it, and you can plant right in your cover crops. I mean, as long as they're cut down and they're decomposing, you can plant right in the rows right next to them.
And there, is there a list of indigenous plants for this area that?
Oh, absolutely. The Virginia Native Plant Society, the Audubon Society, the Master Gardeners, the Department of Natural Resources, are all kinds. Just do a Google search on native plants and then put in your town, but make sure you put a .gov.org or .edu on there, so you don't get all the advertisements. You want real data. So make sure it's a .gov.org or .edu site.
And I know I have a copy of the Virginia Native Plant Society book, so
Yes,
that is.
I go out. I'm an Audubon ambassador, so we always bring that. And we always say, here's the link, use this. So that's a great place to start.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? I think we're running out of time, but thank you, Janene. This was an awesome presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for the feedback.
And I believe we'll all be jumped back to the main room at 11:05. So
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Take care.
We're also going to have a 20-minute break before our next